important. And for those of you who are members of a Christian church, you know in the Bible it says your words show who you are. And this is extremely true in our media use and in the media that we are exposed to. And so I want to talk to you first a little bit about sociology, though. So let me go to the next slide. Because what it is in society is societies are built on communication. They're built on words, and they use these words. We use these words to create a collective consciousness. Now, this idea is not mine, and it's not new. It's an idea that was first proposed by Emile Durkheim, and he was a sociologist, is often considered the father of sociology, and lived and worked in France in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And Durkheim wrote, as you can read on your slides there, that collective consciousness reflects that there are ways of acting and thinking and feeling which possess the remarkable property of existing outside the consciousness of each individual. And that these behaviors and thinking are external to the individual. They kind of create a coercive power that we impose then upon ourselves. We become unaware of how we are being influenced by the collective ideas in our societies. And this idea of a collective consciousness in a society is basically, why do people in a group begin to act in certain ways or do things in certain ways? You can see this in traditional societies, societies that have no media exposure at all, which are very difficult to find today. But these societies, people tend to dress the same way, speak the same way, act the same way. They have a collective consciousness of what is the appropriate type of behavior in a society. Today, this collective consciousness is known as collective behavior. And this term began to be widely used among sociologists in the early 2000s. And Henslin wrote in 2005 that human behavior cannot be understood simply in terms of the individual. We have to look at the social forces that affect people's lives. And so our collective behavior sets what are the acceptable behaviors within our social groups. How does a group behave? I live in Japan, and so much of my behavior is set within Japanese normal standards, but I am not Japanese, and so I'm also influenced by my L1 country, my native country, which is the United States, specifically the state of Oregon, and the behaviors that people from Oregon would have in their dress and in their clothing, how we walk, how we talk. In a Japanese sense, I bow, I nod, I do things that are very Japanese in my behaviors. And then I also do things which are not Japanese in my behaviors. But we always have a drive to conform to our group. Whether that group is a church group, whether that group is a school group, whether that group is a state group or a national group, we conform within our social norms. And there is this drive to conform, which is not new. It is not new in any society. Traditional societies had this desire to conform, this drive to conform as well. But who creates these social norms is us. Now, one thing I need to point out is a word you might not know, and that is the word norms. Okay? Norms means normal, and we talk about social norms. We talk about social norms as the acceptable behavior of a group. So what is normal in your group, those behaviors that you see in the people in your lives, you come to see as normal. I remember my first year in Japan, and so much of what I observed, I just went, this is really strange. This is really odd. But I've been in Japan now for a long time. I'm not going to tell you how long. And behaviors that I once thought were unusual are now my behaviors. I've conformed to this society. So I look around me in the world, I'm conformed to that. But far more important to all of us today in our conforming to our social norms are the media. And the media are really who sets the norms of behavior in your community. Because it is not easy to break away from what society deems normal. And what is deemed normal is what we see, what we read, what we hear. All of those things are important because the consequences of going against social norms can be quite devastating. They can be hard on the individuals. They can lead in some societies to physical punishment. They can lead to people being ostracized from a group. They can lead to a lot of different social problems. So every society pushes groups to conform. And we learn our rules of conforming. We learn our rules of conforming. How do we learn this collective behavior? From all of these things. Every type of media, whether it's a newspaper, a magazine, books, movies, pamphlets, television, internet, radio, podcasts, blogs, Instagram, Line, Snapchat, TikTok, and all the other social networking services. They are promoting, among us, collective behavior. Oops. Come on. Shows, advertisements, and media feeds tap into our societal norms, and our societal norms form our collective behavior. And so we find today in our social situations that the media are extremely important. The words that they provide, the text that they provide, the images that they provide, the sounds that they provide, anything that we receive via some source rather than directly from a person are part of our media flow. And our media flow influences what we do. Now at this point, I want to take a step back a little bit and talk about the types of mediated flows of communication. Basically, we have three different flows. We used to talk of media as a one-to-many form of communication only. And this is the form of communication that you see with books and newspapers, with magazines, with television, where one person or one group is creating the media, and then it is being sent out to many people. And those people are distant, either in actual distance from the person making the media, or they are distant in time. So I can read a book by William Shakespeare, got several in my office here, I can read a book by Shakespeare and his ideas can communicate to me across time. Or I can read today's newspaper and those ideas from today are being communicated across distance. This one-to-many form of communication in more recent media era, the digital era, has moved to a many-to-many. I can make media. I'm making it right now. You can make media and send it out, and we do. We are making media and uploading it all of the time, whether it's media that we upload to YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, put it up on Facebook, it doesn't matter. This type of communication is a many-to-many communication. And it's the amount of voices that are now available. We can find a group that we conform to very easily, and this will continually reinforce that group as normal. The media we use direct our thought patterns. Keep that in mind. The final type of media that you're exposed to is direct one-to-one communication. We used to have personal communication one-to-one only through the form of letters. I would write a letter to my grandmother, and then she would write a letter to me. Yesterday, I actually got a letter, my first physical letter in months, from one of my aunts in the United States. It took almost 2 months to reach me, but that's okay. I was really happy to receive it. She doesn't do social media. She's 96. With most people, though, today I'm communicating one-to-one with them via some type of online platform. Might be WhatsApp, might be Line, might be Messenger, it might be, I don't know, there are so many. Those are the three that I use the most, but I'm on a variety of others. Depends on the person. So, media flow. What is important, though, is that it's retrievable today. Our media flow is retrievable because it's recorded, it's stored, and it's stored in digital form. So we can have our media not just now, but I can reach into my bookshelf, find a book I want, and look back at it. The data is stored. Or I can go to my DVDs and watch a movie or a video that I haven't seen before, or listen to music that I haven't heard for a while. Or I have it stored in a digital form on the internet. I can go to the World Wide Web, go to a search engine, type in a term, and I will get thousands of web pages that have that type of language used in them. In all of this, media are involved in framing our lives. And that's what this lecture is. Media, you, me, a computer. It's recorded. It has some live portions we'll be doing later today, but it's brought to you by our technology. So I want to go back now to the collective behavior. So media and collective behavior are quite important because media intersect our lives. We make choices in our media use. These choices serve to direct our thoughts. Our thoughts become our habits. Our habits become our behavior. Our behavior conforms us to our social group. And this reinforces our collective behavior. This is a self-reinforcing cycle that we've placed ourselves in modern media usage. 40 years ago, before the internet exploded in 1995. 1994, we really go live with the internet. Before that, we're existing in a pre-internet era. There were still people communicating, but not in this way. And at that point in time, most of our media were media that everyone saw. Everyone in a community watched the same programs on the same television stations, read the same popular newspapers in their hometown or the same magazines. But today, our choices have become much broader and at the same time much narrower, because most people continue to choose the same media sources. And this means that the range of opinions they're exposed to are much lower than they were when they were being exposed to ideas from multiple sources. So in some ways, we're returning to an isolated community group, a traditional society, but our traditional groups might be in multiple countries or multiple places within one country. So just a few things to consider before moving forward here is some things about how much time do you spend each week using media, and which media do you use? And I'm sorry I mistyped that, read over that this morning when I was checking my slides. Those things happen. How much influence do these sources of information have on your life? And what effects do you think these sources of information have on society? Now, I'm not with you live in order to interact with these three questions, but I think that they're points you should be considering. The average American high school kid, by the time they finish 12 years of education, because that's the average in the United States, will have watched more than 15,000 hours of television, just television. They will have spent about 11,000 hours in the classroom, which is having a greater impact on their thoughts and behaviors. Probably the one that takes up the most time. So if they're spending more time on their media use, that's where they're learning their collective behavior. So how do media direct collective behavior? Feeds from trendsetters, very important now, the media influencers. Viral videos. I know everyone who is watching has watched at least one viral video. Most of us, myself included, have watched hundreds. Advertising. I don't even want to talk to you about how much advertising you see every day. Well, I guess I do. The average person in a country like Japan sees 300 to 1,000 ads every day. Now, all three of those are propaganda. And this is really what I'm interested in, is propaganda. As a media scholar, I'm a propaganda scholar. I look at how media have influenced our society. And so we're going to talk a little bit now about what is true about media today, and what was true in 1973, and it was also true in 1923. If it is free, you're the product. We are what media companies sell to advertisers. Media companies don't make money from us. YouTube does not make money from us. YouTube makes money from us watching YouTube and YouTube showing us advertisements. Facebook makes money from showing us advertisements. Twitter makes money from showing us advertisements. Television companies, of course, make money from showing us advertisements. Advertisements are propaganda. I take a broad view of propaganda. Some people have a very narrow view of propaganda and see propaganda itself as always negative. But I strongly believe that propaganda is part of our social networks, part of our societies, and we need to understand it. So because propaganda is everywhere, we have to be able to look at it and understand how we are being influenced, how our collective behavior is being shifted because of advertising in some way. So propaganda, in the definition that I follow, which is a definition that comes from Jacques Ellul, and Jacques Ellul was a French sociologist, was very active in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, quite an important scholar in media studies. What he points out to us is that propaganda is a means of convincing people to buy things, to believe things, or to agree with something. And the important contribution, one of his most important contributions, is that propaganda does not have an immediate effect. Okay, and here again I see a typing mistake. I clearly have a inability to proofread my own slides. Propaganda does not have an immediate effect. It nudges us bit by bit to adopt a perspective. Now, most of you are not media scholars yet, but here I want to bring in a few of the types of propaganda techniques that you have been exposed to. And I know you've been exposed to them. One is bandwagon, name calling, snob appeal, testimonial, card stacking, misuse of statistics, plain folks, and my favorite, loaded words. And why that one? Because words matter. So, common definition of propaganda is it's political. The broader definition of propaganda is that it's social. The perception of an individual's need in modern society for self-identity and self-validation. We buy into propaganda because we are members of groups. As humans, we need to be members of groups, whether it's an educational group, a religious group, a gender identity group. It doesn't matter. We have to be parts of groups to be human. So let's take a look at some of those types of propaganda. Okay, slide. We have propaganda, which is directing how the society creates its identity, its myths. And every society has myths. And these social norms are transformed into social myths through media. When you go to a new society, and like when I came to Japan and I said, well, why do people in Japan do this? Well, we just do. It's normal. That's a myth. If you go to the United States, you're going to see Americans do things that you go, that's just crazy. And we will ask, and well, that's what we do. It's what that society has viewed as normal. This does not happen immediately. It takes time. Creating social ideology is time consuming, but it is possible. So here's some brief reminders of propaganda techniques that have been used in media. Here's some bandwagon. At the top, you see an advertisement that was used during the First World War to try to get Americans to enlist in the Navy. And the bottom image is one you might have seen, and that's from World War II propaganda, trying to get women to go back into the workplace, into jobs that were considered men's jobs, and showing women as strong and determined. We can do it. So these two ads indicate a kind of bandwagon appeal, the suggestion that everyone is doing it, so we should too. Here are some more modern examples. Nike's Just Do It campaign, and then two images that might be more familiar with you today, with pictures of people in Japan masked up, and that's from March of this year, and the Dreamtime.com advertisement, which has been changed to people wearing masks in order to promote socially acceptable behavior. These are bandwagon appeals. Everyone is doing it, you should too. Testimonials are another type of appeal that we've all seen. And you have both celebrity appeals and plain folks appeals. So people that are famous, like Lauren Hutton, will be used in advertising campaigns. Plain folks uses people like us. The woman here, a teacher like me, perhaps like you want to be. And she and the Lauren Hutton ad are both appealing to us in different ways. One, successful actress, one, a teacher that's like us. So those testimonials are often used in advertising. Name calling has become a real popular one in the United States in the last 6 years. And we got Trump's labeling of Romney as wimp. We have Obama's campaign of hope being changed to dope by the GOP, the Republican Party. We have anti-Trump ads where we have hype and joke displaying the same sort of look. We get the message very quickly in these appeals, this name-calling type of appeal. But name-calling also occurs in advertisements for things. Here's Pepsi and Coca-Cola conflicting advertising campaigns. One a Pepsi ad, one a Coca-Cola ad, pretty much the same thing. Snob appeal is another popular form of propaganda because we're all susceptible to the ideas of luxury and exclusivity, especially if they come from media influencers. But just making something look luxurious makes us say, ooh, I'd like that. Card stacking is one I know you've seen as well. You tell the positive, you admit the negatives. So for Sun Chips, which are a popular alternative in the United States to potato chips, we have the positive things only about Sun Chips. None of the negatives are there, other than they less salt than you think. Yeah, but more salt than you need. And then the Cheerios advertisement, a popular breakfast cereal. Misuse of statistics is another popular propaganda technique. Here we see one for Chex Mix Select, dark chocolate, 50% less fat than what? And then you have an advertisement that I think you may have seen in the last 6 months. Hand sanitizers kill 99% of germs. We've all seen that. I've seen it on Japanese TV and American media, in French media. But when you read the fine print, you start reading, oh, that's in specific situations. In normal everyday life and how most people use it, wash your hands. Soap and water is better. Yes, when alcohol cleansers are the only thing available, use them. But read the fine print. Loaded words are the ones that appeal to your emotions. And these are the ones I'm most interested in, because as a educator, a linguist, a media scholar, I find that words hold deep appeal to people. So what I have to remember is that most advertising uses a combination of propaganda techniques. And over time, propaganda persuades, but in times of crisis, propaganda can work quickly on those predisposed to the ideas or the products. So I'm going to show you the phrase, I want you, in 2 languages. Now, I want you can imply, I want you, I am in love with you, I want you. I want you are the first words of a song by one of my favorite group of musicians, the Beatles. And the Beatles song, I want you. Don't let me sing, I'm terrible at this. But here we have propaganda in 2 countries, the USA and Germany. I want you for the US Army, and in German, I've been told this is also I want you. I am not a German speaker, so I am trusting my brother who lives in Germany. So those are 2 propaganda posters from World War II. More recently, I want you to get rich, or I want you in a scary movie, or competing messages of I want you. I want you to vote blue. I want you to vote, register today. I want you to keep America great. I want you. We all are using language to persuade. Now, SNS is revising how consumers are sold to advertisers, because here the role of media influencers is become even more prominent. Media influencers, when they show off sandwiches that they've had for lunch, they're probably getting paid. Maybe only a free sandwich, but something eventually is going to come in for them. When they wear designer clothes, they get it for free usually. When they place items in their house so that you can see them in the background and they can talk about their new whatever it is, they probably haven't paid for it. You will be, but they didn't. All humans have to eat to survive, but collective behavior tells us what to eat, what to wear, what to do in our society. So the media everywhere influence us to conform to our groups. Here's a photo of a social influencer, popular in Japan. She's Kozue Akimoto. and she's shown at Paris Fashion Week this year in February. And the caption for this article is, "I want my mask to look as good as my clothes." Here we see the same image of "we can do it" with the woman wearing a mask, because we're trying to direct collective behavior towards mask wearing. In America, good luck. The "I want you" poster repositioned for "I want you to stay at home and wear a mask." Words matter, images matter, media matters, because language directs thought, thought directs behavior, behavior becomes habit. Propaganda works because language is never neutral. Words are the frames for actions. And Marlin points out very clearly that words direct our thought. We are pushed to act and think and adopt as normal what our peers have adopted as normal. Now I want to turn to a couple of words in Japanese society. And I know some of you who are watching this video are L1 speakers of Japanese. Japanese is your first language. But many of you do not speak Japanese. Maybe you've studied it a little bit. So I will be providing the pronunciation and translations for the Japanese terms used here. So consider words in Japanese society. I've got 3 kanji shown on your screen now, and they're this kanji for furosha. The first 2 kanji, furo, are a combination of a word for flotsam plus wave. Okay, so the second kanji in that set there is wave. The first kanji is flotsam. Well, flotsam, if you've studied English and you're going, I don't know that word. English isn't my first language. Well, flotsam is garbage floating on waves. It's stuff that's been thrown off of ships or that floats out from rivers into the ocean. Sha, the last word, the last kanji in that combination word, means people. So furosha literally means people that are garbage. So we have the collective consciousness idea of this set of terms, that people are garbage. There are some people that are garbage. And the literal Japanese term for the homeless is what that is. People that are garbage. So this is the collective behavior that comes about from that collective consciousness. The homeless are ignored, they're denigrated, and you can see this in the translation of furosha as vagrants and hobos, which are negative terms for the homeless in English language materials. Media language matters because it is how we transform society. And so the collective behavior in a society can be predicted by the choices of words that we use in a society. If people are referred to in ways that make them lower and less human than others, then they are treated as less human than others. And so my question that I want you to think about, we don't have the opportunity to discuss, but the question to think about here is, what collective behavior can be predicted by the choice of the word furosha? Well, words matter. Some of the actions toward the homeless during the period in Japanese society when this term was widely accepted were quite horrid. Here is some examples from two Japanese newspapers, the Asahi Shimbun and the Yomiuri Shimbun. And the Japanese text is translated for those of you who don't read Japanese. But in the early 90s, fudosha was the common term in the Japanese media. The term that people who were without home was referred to basically placed them as less than human. And so those words led to problems like overlooking the homeless in Japanese society, ignorance of the reasons for homeless, violence against the homeless, and although it was not condoned, there was little police action to stop it. Now, how did this start to change? In 1991, the term homeless, homuresu, which you see in katakana form of Japanese and the second line there on the screen, was introduced. It was used 3 times in 4 newspapers that I surveyed from 1991 to 1995. It became commonly used, though, after the Great Kobe earthquake in 1995, and that earthquake left thousands of people in the Kobe area without homes. And the Japanese media quickly realized that we can't call these people fudosha because they're not fudosha. They're just suddenly regular people that don't have homes. So they started using the term homeless, but not just for the refugees from the Kobe earthquake, but for those who had been homeless before the earthquake occurred. From 2005, the media began using the terms mushokusha or mujutaku, unemployed people or unhoused. Those terms are quite different than calling somebody floating garbage. And so what shift would you predict in society when we change the words that we use? How do our words influence social behavior? So when those living on the streets are no longer labeled fudosha, you would expect to see a change in how society views them, and you do. And so in 2006, we see the Yomiuri Shimbun and the Asahi Shimbun talking about the homeless in different terms than they talked about them 15 years earlier. The opinion journal Big Issue, sold in 28 countries worldwide, and for the young man, a way for a homeless person to independently support themselves, okay? They become homeless people, not floating garbage people. So this is why I say that media really are the words that we choose. Words matter, images matter, texts matter, because media direct collective behavior. Language directs what we think. The texts I use, the words, the images, the symbols, indicate my belief systems. We think the words we use. My thought directs my behavior. What I think, I try to do. If we think it's important, we try to do it. For example, I go to church. I help in my community. I think I have to be responsible. I think I have to be educated. I think I have to question when there are problems in the society that I see. I think part of my job is to point out problems. That's a job of a university professor. These are things that I think. My thoughts direct my action. My behavior becomes my habit. This is why our words matter. If you become a media maker sometime in your life, or if you are making media now, keep this in mind. Your words matter. Propaganda works because language is never neutral. Words are the frames for the actions, and the frame that you use becomes your behaviors. The media you use indicates the behaviors you will adopt. The media messages that you are exposed to become your thoughts. These thoughts will direct your behavior. The behavior will direct your habits, and your habits become routines which you do not question. And this is the point at which propaganda has been successful. Does it take place immediately? No. It takes place over time, but it takes place because most people do not pay attention to the media that they use. They look at a viral video and they send it on to their friends. They don't stop and think about what the words, what the images are really showing. What are they really saying? And how can these video images, these words, how can they influence society, good or bad? In which ways will my behaviors change because I expose myself to this media? So this brings me to a few discussion questions that I hope we'll have some time to talk about later today. What media do you use regularly? What was the last advertisement you recall? Excuse me, I have to, sorry. Why do you remember the ad? Would you buy the product advertised? Do you agree with the idea being promoted? Why or why not? What is the frame of an issue in your community that various media sources use? How do the words used to frame this issue vary between media sources? What have you done in response to the media you use? And how have media influenced your thought and behavior? I know that's a lot to think about, and these online lectures are always an unusual forum for discussion, but we're going to try that. Here are a few references. These will be available for you on these slides, so that if you want to go and watch that video from 1973 about television delivers people, really short, it's only about 7 minutes, highly recommend it. Thank you all very much for watching the video, and I'm going to escape from my slideshow and stop my screen share. So, any questions?
Well, that was very interesting, Professor Swenson. I would actually encourage everybody. I'm going to be putting everything into the Google Classroom, and if you're okay, what I'll do is I'll forward on some questions. I think, you know, for those in Africa, there's a lot there. I was really interested to hear. I've been in Japan for a quarter of a century. Didn't know about the homeless. But you can just, you know, I can see where this is, you know, what some of the changes. And you know, East Africa has had a lot of different issues, and the words, especially from the neighboring country of Burundi,
Mm-hmm.
the dehumanizing prior to 1994's genocide was instrumental in sort of giving that that voice to those people who dehumanized the.
It's words matter, and you know, I grew up in an era where I heard people use the N word in the United States, or the J word. And those are words that I won't say, because words do matter.
Mm-hmm.
And there are terms for people that are my skin color and your skin color in Japan that I take offense to, because words matter. you know. And when I first started looking at the media coverage of the homelessness in Japan and looking back pre-95 earthquake, because that was my starting point, was actually the 1995 earthquake, is looking at disaster news coverage. And I became more and more intrigued by this sudden shift in terminology. Now, the word Fudosha continued to be used until the early 2000s within the Japanese press, but the usage dropped dramatically from 1995. But if you go back earlier, and I go back as much as I can as things are digitized, because quite honestly, I really don't like reading through old newspapers looking for the word Fudosha. I would rather do a search on it. But yeah, sitting in a library reading microfiche is no longer fun at my age.
Yeah, great. Well, I think, and I know that at some point you might have a chance to look at some of the lectures from this series, but yours was the perfect capstone, because we had 3 other lectures that one was on, and 2 others were on language and conflict management. And so this really fits extremely well in.
Yeah.
I think everybody's going to get quite a lot out of it. So everybody, please look forward to the comments that I'll leave in the Google Classroom, and then I'll post those discussion questions. And please reflect on this, review it, and please answer into that. And I'd like to say once again, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for inviting me to do this. It was interesting to think about how I was going to approach it and make it accessible to people on multiple continents.
Great. Okay. Thanks again. Have a great day.
Okay. Thank you.